Okay, I guess we are ready to go. Don, good morning, everyone, and welcome to BioMass Canada Cluster Webinar Series. My name is Mahmoud Ebadian. I'm a research associate at the University of British Columbia, working with two research groups at UBC, BioMass and Bioenergy Research Group, as well as Forest Product Biotechnology and Bioenergy Research Group. And today we are going to have the first webinar. As you probably saw in the newsletter that we distributed through Biofuel Nets Canada, we have 9 webinars from December 2020 today till March 2021. And if you are interested, you can find information about 9 webinars on BioMass Canada website. As you see, you can find all of the information on webinar page. So you just need to click on the page and you can find the list of presentation, the schedule, the speakers, and also you can find the registration link, and they are all free webinars. So hopefully you can actually join all of these webinars with us. And the focus of this webinar series is on de-risking and commoditizing underutilized biomass resources in order to facilitate the evolving Canadian bioeconomy. The focus is going to be agricultural biomass, which is one of the underutilized biomass resources in Canada for bioenergy, biofuel, and even bio-based products. And that's going to be, you are going to hear from different activities that Don is going to explain today as part of BioMass Canada Cluster. So before I introduce the speaker, I just want to highlight a few housekeeping items. So the webinar is being recorded, and you can find a copy of the recording and a slide on BioMass Canada website on the webinar page. So we're going to put all of the recording and the slide on the same page I mentioned before. And please type your question in the Q&A, not chat box. So we have 2 boxes. One of them is Q&A box, another one is chat box. So use Q&A to type your question. And also, I encourage everyone to type your name and affiliation in the chat box, so at least we have a sense of social networking in this platform. So at least we know who is attending. So that would be a great way to get to know each other a bit using this webinar series. So with that, I would like to introduce the speaker, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Donald Smith, a distinguished James McGill professor. During his 35 years at McGill University, Don has conducted research in the production and physiology of crop plants, with an emphasis on plant-microbe interaction, and most recently within the context of biofuel feedstock production. He has trained about 81 graduate students, most of them are PhD students, and published over 330 papers, generated 13 patents, and started a spin-off company, and commercialized technology that are now applied to over 100 million hectares of croplands per year. He's currently leading the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, BioMass Canada research cluster. That's exactly what he's going to talk for his first presentation. And AFC has funded this cluster for $2.3 million per year for 5 years, with contribution, of course, from industry partners. And also he's leading the Eastern Canadian Oilseed Development Initiative Network, which is again funded by AFC at $1 million per year. So with that, I want to pass the screen to Don. And Don, we are looking forward to your presentation, and please take it away.
All right, here we go. All right, so welcome everybody. We'll get this up here. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm gonna put my laser pointer up. There we go, just in case it's useful. So here we are. So we're going to talk about the cluster. So the role of BioMass Canada, the cluster, so in facilitating the evolving Canadian bioeconomy. So it's an exciting piece of work to be doing. The economy, bioeconomy especially, things are moving ahead with that. We'll talk about some parts of that as we go through here. So yeah, so the bioeconomy. This is knowledge-based production and the use of biological resources. So this is to provide products, processes, services, all of these things in all economic sectors within a framework of sustainable a sustainable economic system. So this comes from the Bioeconomy Council, and this is it's I guess a fairly generic, a fairly broad definition of a bioeconomy, but it's workable in this context. So I've gone with this. What we want to do is expand Canada's bioeconomy so that it can help address the challenges associated with employment, industrial activity, the nation's resource-dependent communities, help all these things, bring them together and move them along in terms of development. So I note here that employment in the agricultural sector, it's dropped about 10% since the beginning of this century, so over the last 20 years or so. And biomass production, though, if we start utilizing it in an effective way, so it also helps the bioeconomy, it can, in fact, reverse this and make food commodities more profitable. We'll talk a little bit about that, and increase earnings from marginal lands that farmers may have and be underexploiting or just plain not using right now. So there's all of that. So biomass production, yes, it can help reverse this by making food commodities more profitable. And this can happen through advanced biofuels. This can help with the environmental side and climate change, et cetera. And on the economic side, the high value bioproducts can help with that quite a lot. So, oops, there we go. Ultimate goal of all this is to fit aspects of Canadian agriculture into the growing Canadian bioeconomy, which it's a little bit it's growing now, but it's got a ways to go. But in doing all this, we will improve Agriculture Canada producers' incomes. This is part of the business. We want to make our producers more solvent, and this because they'll get revenues from marginal lands, production from marginal lands, where the good part of this is food materials not generally produced there, so you're not competing with food, and adding value to agricultural waste. So this is crop residues. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. So improving the overall sustainability of Canadian agricultural sector as a result. So there'll be reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and again, partly by using biomass to produce energy and other commodities that we need, and making the Canadian crop production systems more climate change resilient. And we'll talk about that a little bit, especially in my second presentation, but both of these things will be important. Okay, so the environmental motivation for all this. So BioMass Canada was formed to mobilize Canada's capacity. We want to commoditize biomass. This is a resource that's very, very potentially underexploited right now. And biomass from the ag sector, so we can supply biomass to fuel Canada's developing bioeconomy. I've already touched on this, but this is really the core part of it. And ultimately, we can decrease the carbon footprint of both energy and materials. This could be biofuels, and at the same time, the high value bioproducts that can be extracted at the same time. So, well, I've got this note here. So I just say here, CO2 released from biomass biofuel was taken from the atmosphere, so photosynthetically fixed out of the atmosphere, only a year or two before it released back into it through combustion. I get this question from time to time when I'm talking to audiences about biofuels. They'll say, well, you know, fossil fuels, biofuels, you burn them, they release CO2. What's the difference? The difference is that the ones that come out of fossil fuels have been out of the atmosphere for tens to hundreds of millions of years, and everything has equilibrated to their being gone. Whereas the ones that come out from biofuels just came out of the atmosphere last year or the year before, or something like that, quite recently. So there's no re-equilibration needed. Okay, high value bioproducts come with this. So there's several things. There's a number of possibilities, and there are other possibilities in the longer term that will come along. So these provide, well, higher value things, so they make the economics work better. Okay, so the economic motivation we say here. So there are something on the order of 9 million hectares of marginal land, and you can get into a big discussion about what exactly constitutes marginal land. But so this is a kind of I think a generally agreed upon number, but you can get into some long discussions about this. But then if you say, okay, we're going to produce biomass, so there, say something, you get somewhere between $50 and $200 a ton on this. Sorry, $200 per hectare from this. And that could generate funds up to, say, getting close to $2 billion a year. So that's a reasonable amount of money. And for the agricultural community, the producers, that's okay. It could be things like switchgrass, miscanthus, poplar. You know, this is actually edging into trees, or we're sort of under controlled forestry here, but agricultural forestry. And then on top of that, if there are these high value bioproducts, this could be, they could actually be worth more than this. So it's potentially quite profitable if that goes ahead. Crop residue biomass. So this is, you're producing food crops. You have the leaves, the stems, etc., left over. But an important caveat in this is that you can only take about a third a year. If you take more than that, then you'll start depleting the soil carbon. If you deplete soil organic matter, well, you make the soils less productive, and you also are effectively just transferring carbon from the soil into the atmosphere through a kind of a convoluted way. So we would prefer not to do that. So you could take a third a year, or you could take it all every third year, which might be more convenient. Anyway, so what we want to do is you use this material, and you can get close to 100 million tons per year produced, so about 30 million tons per year available if you're taking a third. And so say here again, if you're looking at $40 a ton gross, about 1.2 billion. So these are big numbers, and these numbers are before the high value bioproducts. So what will happen in the end, this will generate well-paying jobs in bioprocessing facilities across the rural landscape. If you're moving biomass around, for instance, for energy production, you can't truck it very far. You shouldn't truck it very far. It really starts to undermine the energy balance. So you want facilities distributed across, for instance, say the prairies. This provides employment out across the landscape, which is a useful thing. Some of those areas are becoming underpopulated, and they have issues with on the financial side. So this is just if you're looking at the overall approach, barriers, solutions. So this is where we are. So we look at market barriers. It's an emerging demand. So there's lots of things that aren't completely in place around this yet. And there's a lack of standards on sustainability, et cetera. And so if you look at this, some things we could do about this, and some of these we are, clearly addressing. Public policies to make up for market uncertainty. We're not doing that, but we're providing information for that. Life cycle analysis, sustainability criteria and how they fit, technical barriers, uncertainty in biomass quality, agricultural for the agricultural operators, and seasonality. It's from one season to the other. You get drought, you get other conditions, and it makes it more challenging. So there's always some uncertainty when you're dealing with the climate, and we're making it more uncertain as things go ahead. So research and innovation can help with this. And then investment barriers. So there's some of the infrastructure that needs to be in place isn't there yet. Biomass productivity is not well investigated yet. So we're working on these things. And there's uncertainty on the availability of biomass volumes, and again, the quality, et cetera. So field trials, and then de-risk the biomass value chain. Again, we are addressing aspects of this very clearly. And then there's public opinion barriers. So this is where there's a perception out there that this will have an impact on food production, and that doesn't have to be the case, and I will address that. No significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. This is what I was addressing earlier. People will say, oh, they all produce CO2 when you burn them. It doesn't matter, but it does. Okay, so I'm going to press on. Here we go. So these are the themes. We're organized into 4 themes: biomass and bioenergy for northern latitude. So this is the first one, and there are 2 activities in here. One of them's on biomass feedstock for food and energy security. So this is making use of the biomass that's produced at high latitudes for energy, et cetera. Zero waste process for conversion in wet greenhouse. This is using waste material and agroforestry residues to help generate food supplies, et cetera. Theme 2, here we are. This is the biggest one, optimization of biomass production. So biochar, one on biochar, so improve soil, et cetera. One on food wastes. So again, trying to make the best use of that material as a source of biomass. Purpose-grown biomass crops here. And here's another one, also purpose-grown biomass crops, in this case, a focus on sorghum, which as the climate change moves ahead could become more and more relevant. And then finally, development of biologicals. This is biostimulants, et cetera. Theme 3, we're into supply chain logistics, et cetera here, and a certain amount of pre-processing. So a lot of thinking around pelletizing here. That's on the wood pellet side, on the forestry side. This has been quite successful. So we're now looking at potentially doing this on the agricultural side to a greater degree. So both of these 2 are on pellets of one sort or another. And then we were right now putting one together on looking at supply chain, and in this case, right from production of biomass material out to densification for shipping. So it covers pretty much all aspects of what we do in one way or another. So it helps integrate Biomass Canada. All right, so greenhouse gas reductions. So agricultural residues, So this is non-food biomaterials. There's lots of this across Canada. About 48 million dry tons per hectare per year could be available. So renewable fuels, you can reduce Canadian greenhouse gas emissions substantially. And I'm going to be a little bit cautious about my numbers here. I did these like late last night and early this morning, so I'd like to get them verified before anybody buys into them too heavily. But additionally, again, up to 29 more megatons here, CO2 equivalent, could result from growing biomass crops. So this is residues after you harvest food crops. And this is biomass crops themselves growing on marginal lands. So marginal lands, these various 4, 5, and 6 classes soils. They're usually shallow or sandy or rocky and things like this. They've got other issues. So these are not used for food production. So we avoid the food versus fuel conflict. And then I say here, just a meaningful slice. This it could be, if my numbers are correct here, a meaningful slice of Canada's Paris Accord CO2 emissions goals up to a quarter. Again, assuming my calculations are correct. So this is just an example, and actually, we'll talk about this more in my next talk, but I've just used my own material as an example because it's the one I understand best. So yeah, so this is from research in my lab, which is currently being funded through BioMass Canada, and we are grateful. So this is looking at interactions between microbes and plants. And we've been doing some work on signal compounds. So you see here, these are just little Arabidopsis plants here. This is in the of stress. And we're using salt stress here because it's the easiest stress to apply uniformly. So that's what we're using initially. And usually what happens is the stress response mechanisms for one abiotic stress and another overlap substantially. So if it works for one, it probably works for the other. And you can see here, this is no stress. There they are. This is 150 millimolar salt stress. You can see that the plant's about 10% of the size. So this is lipocyto-oligosaccharides. These were known to be involved in signaling in the establishment of nitrogen-fixing symbiosis in legumes, but turns out they have what I'm now pretty sure is an older role in modulating stress responses in all kinds of plants. So here we are at 10 to the minus 6 molar, 10 to the minus 8 molar. So we see that the plant is pretty much restored to the size of the control. And here we are at Thristin 17. Actually, we discovered the strain that produces this. We discovered the compound itself. And we're just in the process of trying to commercialize it now. And this stuff here, we are 10 to the minus 9th and 10 to the minus 11th molar, very low concentrations. And we can see, again, it's pretty much restored the plant to its control size. So these things seem to have potential. This is the one, the LCO technology is the one that's going on a very large surface area of agricultural land right now. So, okay, so we have shown that treating the plants with, again, really low concentrations can dramatically help the plants deal with stress. There's a lot of thinking behind this. We're just writing a review paper around this now about why this might have happened. But anyway, drought, high temperature, salinity, all of these sorts of things, and these are all potentially associated with climate change. Conditions are likely to become more prevalent as climate change develops as a result. So these can help increase production of, in the end, both food and fuel. Because if you're looking at residual biomass, it will increase, if it just overall increases the growth of plants, especially when stress is occurring, you'll get a bigger plant. So it'll have more biomass and more seeds, more grain, or what, depending on what you're harvesting, but let's say grain in most cases. So what you get instead of food versus fuel, you get food and fuel out of a system like this. So quite useful, I think, in that case. So more grain, more stems, more leaves. And this increases production in the establishment year for switchgrass. We've shown, well, these, I think we've done a bit of work with the Thristin on this and a number of other microbes that we've worked with. So yeah, these micro signal compounds they produce could potentially allow development of more climate change resistant agricultural systems inside the country, which would be, I like to think at least, could be quite useful. So some social directions that are happening right now, California's recent bioeconomy, say incentives, they are fueling a mindset change. People are thinking about this differently. They say, okay, things are shifting. So for big oil players, for instance, I say here, Shell recently withdrew its support from the climate change denying lobby group called American Legislative Exchange Council. So you get people like this backing into these things. That shows things are changing. Mark Carney left the Bank of England to work on climate change and sustainable energy. Jeff Bezos put a big chunk of money in climate change issues. This is the whole Swedish thing about flight shame. Nobody's talking about this right now because nobody's flying very much, but I'm assuming this will come back. And And I say this turnaround may drastically change the landscape for the global bioeconomy. There could be, there's I think, going to be a lot of pressure on sustainable energy, et cetera. And I just, over the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of chatter that we may have already passed the moment of peak oil. Certainly, because of the COVID-19 thing, a lot of people are working from home. I think almost all of us are working from home. I'm in my office right now, but it's not the usual thing, just that they're tearing my house apart right now. So that's the situation, and people are commuting less, and people are doing a lot more of the kind of thing we're doing right now. So online stuff. And I'm sure when it's all over, people will go back to the office to some degree, but I think there'll be far fewer in-person business meetings, and some people will continue to work from home. So things are going to shift. And I think that's the perspective right now, is that peak oil may in fact have passed over the last few months. This is just one of the people that works with us pulled this together. This is looking at investment categories. And as you see here, feedstock, bioenergy, bioproducts, biofuels, biofuels by themselves. And this is the total. And this is public companies, blue, private companies and universities in brown. But the point is that as of last year, just over a year ago, there was about $1 billion invested in a fairly short time frame. So there is growing interest in all this. So coming back to our cluster per se, it's the first cluster focused on commoditizing biomass in Canada. So I like to think that we're forging ahead. We're getting into some new areas in this. The newness of this area is the enormous potential, as I indicated above, for this cluster to benefit the economy, and especially the bioeconomy, the environment, public policy. We can provide information to inform policy development. Agricultural producers across the country, I've said several times about how this can potentially help them. Well, we're hoping it makes this cluster unique and valuable. So focus on profitability for ag operators, farm to market, horizontal intra-sectorial, so within the ag sector, but linking up things horizontally. Technologies will be applicable to all farmers in Canada. Focuses on emerging technologies, and we'll talk about, again, we'll do my activity first, so we'll see that some of the work that's going on there, but we'll do everybody's over time, and they're all interesting. Creating a network of field trial sites, developing innovative revenue streams for crop producers, potentially. We certainly, some of this is being taken up now. Holistic approach to improving farm profitability. So I say here, AAFC has historically funded clusters working on food commodities. So, we can focus on wheat or all these very important food commodities, and that's how it should be. But this one now aims at removing barriers for farmers to engage in the production of biomass. So that's a bit new. We have some synergies going with other clusters. So Biomass Canada will work with other funded clusters where there's overlap, basically. So, and ensure synergies with them. And this will help pool data sets across the various clusters. And we're working to develop a relationship with Bioinnovation Canada. We've chatted with them a number of times recently. And actually, we'd probably have everything in place right now, but as I say, COVID has slowed things down from time to time. Biomass Quality Network, I'm actually on their board. So, we have a meeting next week. So we're very linked in with those guys. And then this is just sort of a sense of critical success factors. These are the things that can make us go ahead. So maintain good teamwork among cluster researchers, industry partners, and the Biomass Canada cluster personnel. And we've been working at Xiaomin, especially, has worked hard to pull all these people together and make sure that they are indeed chatting and trying to get the best out of each other's expertise, et cetera. So engage industry partners. We have industry partners on our board, and we've been inviting them to our workshops as much as possible. Maintain strong communication among researchers. So we get the PIs together from time to time. Industry partners are part of some of these meetings, and farm community. Oops, sorry, I don't know what happened there. Farm communities and our own management. Demonstrate evidence-based agri-biomass research. So we'll have the numbers, we'll have the data, we'll have the experiments, so make sure that people are aware of these and what it's telling us. Reach out to related clusters, and I just talked about that, and train HQP for future biomass markets. So we have a good number of HQP in here already. So overall, Biomass Canada cluster will play an important role in integrating the Canadian agricultural sector, strengthen the Canadian agricultural community because of better revenue source or new revenue sources, et cetera. Job creation I mentioned already. So there'll be these potential processing plants across the prairies, et cetera, and everywhere else too. Reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, this is key for just so many reasons. So more sustainable and climate change resilient agriculture, so we can make our plants more stress resistant. This will help a lot. And then finally, there's all the knowledge and technology transfer that goes on. This is actually a mandated activity of BioMass Canada. So that's the end. So if anybody has questions, I'd be very, very happy to take them.
Okay, thank you very much, Don. We have a few questions. Before that, I'd like to mention that, as you know, Canada has the highest amount of biomass per capita, and we are only using 5%, like biomass is only contributing to 5% of the biomass, like the energy supply in Canada. So it shows that we have a significant amount of underutilized biomass in Canada. And as Don mentioned, that BioMass Canada cluster is trying to focus on those underutilized biomass and produce a commodity from that biomass, and then hopefully we can find a market not only for bioenergy and biofuel, but also for bioproduct. I guess that's one of the focus of this cluster. It's not only for bioenergy and biofuel, so we are looking at the bio-based product as well. So we have a question. I guess Shahab has a tough question for you, Don. So he's saying that if using, let's say, agriculture biomass and farmer are making, let's say, $40 per ton, is there any estimate of total economic value for the society as a whole?
Well, as I said, it strays up into the low billions in terms of the total value of the biomass per se. If there are associated bioproducts, high value bioproducts, it could be substantially more than that. And of course, like any sector or any basic activity, you employ people to do that. They earn money. They go into town. They buy, who knows, shoes, socks, food, things like this. That generates economic activity downstream. So so the potential, I guess, if I was doing a horseback thing and taking a risk, I say it could be maybe looking at around 3 billion in terms of value of the actual biomass itself. If you're looking at associated bioproducts, and I really am guessing here, but let's say you could crank the whole thing up to about 10 billion, and then downstream activity, I don't know, but you could assign some sort of activity. But the point is, it's very meaningful.
Okay, thanks. And I got a question from Kevin. So he's asking, what do you think is the most limiting factor to expanding the biomass, biofuel, bioproduct sectors in Canada?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. A few years ago now, I guess it's 5 or 6 years ago now, they built a number of biomass production or biomass processing facilities in the United States in the Corn Belt. And the first thing they ran into were problems with supply chain logistics. They thought they would just go there and there's all this corn residue and it'd be fine, right? And then it just turned out that the whole business of securing the biomass and getting it into the plant where it's going to be processed was very complicated and very time consuming. So that's probably a big one. I don't know. Other things are, just reliable production and production of things like biomass crops and things, but I have to expand quite a bit. So now I'm past the most one. It's hard to say which is the most, but there are a number of key factors that one can identify and say, okay, these are the ones that have to be addressed. So I don't know if that helps. But.
Yeah, thanks. So there is another question that if a company would like to participate in the research activity, like we have 9 activities, how they can join biomass cluster, not only for existing cluster, for these 5 years, but if you plan to continue, how these companies, from a small company to large company, how they can contribute and participate in the biomass cluster.
Well, I think the first thing they have to do is to probably the very first thing to do is send an email to either myself or Xiaomin Zhou, who really manages the thing on the cluster on a day-to-day basis. And it's hard to overestimate Xiaomin's role in all this, but she really carries the thing forward, as I say, on a day-to-day basis. And so you send an email to one of us, or preferably both of us, and just introduce yourself, and we can then look at where you might be able to link in. And we could see what the flexibility is right now, and we'd have to see about that. But having said that, the whole cluster will probably be up for renewal. I think it's about 2 years. You have to get everything. Well, I have to get everything underway for renewal quite soon, and so there's a chance to get hardwired into it for the next round. So there's all that. but there are other ways to do to get other funds from time to time, and that could then develop a project that could be attached to us too. This is also possible, I think, although we'd have to make sure it's we have to clear it with the AFC each time. So.
Okay, thanks. And by the way, we only have time for one more question, but if we have more time at the end of the presentation, I come back to this question. And if we cannot answer the question, I send all of the unanswered questions to the speakers, like Don, and also for the future webinars. And hopefully they can provide a written answer to your question when we post them on the website. So I ask one more question, then Don, we can move on to the next presentation. So Charles is asking, it's great that the utilization of Canadian marginal land would reduce greenhouse gas emissions substantially. I wonder if you could comment on the greenhouse gas assessment considering life cycle analysis, taking into account the fertilizer, transportation, and processing processes.
Yeah, sure. I think okay. That's a big question, but yeah, if you're looking at, say, fertilizers, for instance, right? So if you're considering that kind of thing, if you're looking at biomass crops, the total amount you have to add is not that great because it depends when you harvest them in part, but assuming you harvest them after they're fully mature in the fall or even the following spring, the plants will mobilize a lot of the stuff out of the above ground structure and put it into roots over the winter. So when you harvest it, you're not taking too much away by way of nutrients. It's also possible to get some nitrogen fixing bacteria, and that can help a bit. So the total fertilizer inputs don't have to be all that large. So that can help quite a bit. So that could make the life cycle analysis more positive. What were the other factors? I just forget, sorry.
So it's been talking about the marginal lands.
Because marginal lands. Sure. But he mentioned fertilizers. There was a number of things he was saying in terms of life cycle analysis. There were several factors. Fertilizer was just one.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll let it go with that. That's my example anyway. So yeah. Okay,
great, thanks. And again, if you have time at the end of the second presentation, we come back to some of these questions. Okay, thanks. Don, do you want to start the second presentation?
I'm going to try here. Hang on. I'm going to stop here for a second, and then I'll come back in with the other one. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Sorry, it's going to take me a minute to find this here. Well, I don't do that. And where am I? I just need to get out of. There we go. Sorry, I want to get out of full screen for a second so I get it my slides, and I had carefully put the little box with my image in it on top of the button to leave the full screen thing here. So okay, here we are. I'm always saying the person in life who annoys me most is me. Okay. Oops. Okay, sorry, I'm muted here. I don't know why, but I'm muted.
No, you're good, Don. I muted myself. Yeah.
You're muted. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. My fault. Okay, so we'll go into this. Get my laser pointer up again. I don't know if you guys like the laser pointer or not, but I'll put it up. All right. So here we go. So we're going to talk about. Hang on. I'm going to run my. I like to run my timer so I can make sure I'm not running wildly over time or anything. I can talk a lot when you get me started. So. Okay. All right. So this is my activity in here. So this is development of biologicals as low input sustainable production inputs for fuel and residual food production. Not a very inspiring title in a way. It's a bit too long and a bit too descriptive. But anyway, that's it. So I just like to make the acknowledgements at the outset. So again, Government of Canada, who's funding this through the Canadian Agricultural Partnerships. Biomass cluster holder is BiofuelNet, so that's the not-for-profit company that runs things. And in my particular activity, the partners are AgriWorld, Ulysses, Synagri. So these are the guys that are in one way or another involved in some piece or another. So this is the goal statement for a microbial consortium already established for controlled environment work. We have one of these. We're evaluating its ability to improve production of biomass crops, crop residue, and food material. We're also bioprospecting to find new plant growth promoting. Actually, we've done a round of that, and it's been very successful. We'll talk about that. Investigate mechanisms of action for the growth promoting bacteria involved that come out of this. Test crops. Here we are. Biomass crops, so switchgrass, cordgrass, miscanthus, and then crop residues from corn and potato. Here we go. So we're looking at, here we are, project overview. So biomass crops, we talked about this, marginal lands already, class 3 and up, greater than class 3. So if we're on these, there's not a lot of competition with food crops, so that's good. And plants are more stressed on these guys anyway, and climate change is just going to aggravate this. So perennial crops, if you're putting these biomass crops, if you get them successfully established, they'll be there for decades. And so these things, if they can help with establishment, that's very, very useful. Fuel plus increased sort of carbon organic matter content of the soil, so they can increase that. So you can produce fuel, can help with reducing greenhouse emissions, and then you can result in some net transfer of carbon from the atmosphere into soil as well. So these things can both help with greenhouse gas emissions. And I say here, this is another one of my estimates late at night, but again, meaningful decreases in greenhouse gas emissions, or at least we hope. Food crop residues, we say here again, some more greenhouse of my, sort of relatively off the cuff estimates of greenhouse gas emissions. So these plant growth promoting rhizobacteria can help deal with stress. So that's they don't all do it, but a lot of them do it. And so they can increase yield, particularly when stress is present. And when I get asked about this, I always say, a crop growing in the field is exposed to stress often. So if you have optimal growing conditions during the day, it's probably too cold at night. So this is how it works. So climate change resilience in the end is what could come out of this. And this could lead to, as I say, where we're dealing with food crops, increase in both food and fuel. So this is, let's say, that if we're looking at the overall picture, the problem and opportunity, there's a large area of potential land for biomass production in Canada. We're a very big country, and we have a reasonably large area of agricultural land. So purpose-grown biomass would be produced in the more stressful environment. We said these marginal lands around the edges. So it's, again, they could benefit from things that help them deal with stress to a greater degree. And this is the sort of the overall approach. You say, okay, there's uncertainties about biomass feedstock supply. We've identified this as a bottleneck in the bioeconomy. I mentioned that in the previous talk. Purpose-grown biomass and stress. So this is one of the things about, the various application of biologicals. So they are produced on marginal lands, as I said, more stress more often for starters, and then climate change on top of that. But as I said earlier, a lot of these plant-associated microbes help deal with stress. And on the food crop side, which covers a large area of our good agricultural land, you can take about a third of the crop residues each year. So climate change, there'll be more stress even on those soils. You won't have the initial stress of a poor soil situation, but because climate will oscillate more violently, we'll have more stress as the crops are developing, even on good land. And so these PGPRs can help increase growth and lead to food and fuel, as I keep saying. But there's even the possibility that in some cases, some of the land that's not very marginal, if we add these things to it, you can start to produce food crops. So we'll see where it all goes. So this is the phytomicrobiome and stress, and I did show you this picture already with the LCOs and the thyrsin 17. And here we are. This is with water stress. So this is osmotically induced water stress. And you can see here the effect of the correct LCO concentration and the correct thyrsin 17 concentration, pretty much restoring again, Arabidopsis plants. So can help in a wide range of ways. So here we are. These PGPR are often helping with nutrient mobilization. Oh yeah, and I should have mentioned the word phytomicrobiome. That's the collective community of microbes associated with the plant. So they're pretty much, they can be at least in pretty much all tissues. But when you get below ground in the roots, because they're in the soil, it's moist and there's a lot of organic matter there, there's a lot of microbial activity. You get really a very diverse community there. But having said that, that community is fairly carefully regulated by the plant. So yeah, nutrient mobilization, they can help with that, phosphorus and things like that, iron. Hormone production, they produce plant hormones or analogs to plant hormones or precursors to plant hormones, these various things, and those can regulate plant production, plant growth. We do some work on biocontrol, so you get things that will control disease organisms. There's a lot of our focus is here on signals. So these are we started with working in the nitrogen fixing symbiosis with soybean, and you get signal exchange where the soybean plant produces isoflavonoid signals to its symbiotic bacterium that produces lipocyto-oligosaccharides, LCOs, back. But they produce these things at very low concentrations, and they work pretty effective, far too low to be metabolites or anything. They're just signals. So we've started calling these hormones of the holobiont, because the holobiont is, you combine the phytomicrobiome plus the plant. This is the holobiont. So this is what we're calling them now. So we're putting the seeds on Petri plates with signals. So they're sitting on an agar surface, and they can either be under no stress or salt stress. And again, signals improve growth. So this is the picture I already showed you guys. But then again, here we are with water stress. Well, it's osmotic stress, but yeah, it's a type of water stress. So yeah, just to talk about the progress to date with this work. So this was one of these things that was sitting in the back of my tiny mind for quite a while. It's a plant I was interested in. And so I had a student available. We went and looked very directly at this. This is Amphicarpi bractata. So if you see the leaves here, this is the closest relative to soybean in North America. If you look at the leaves, it looks a lot like soybean leaves. It's a thinner plant and vining. But actually, wild soybean is also thinner, although not as thin as this, and vining. So it's interesting. But you can see here, these are roots of the plant. You can see the nodule on it. So we isolated microbes largely from the nodules themselves, actually. So yeah, so three of the most positive of these we chose to focus on. This is the work of a current PhD student. Given what you have to do with all this, a student can't handle probably more than 4 at a time. So one of them, interestingly, excretes material into the medium that enhances stress tolerance. So this is the one you see here. If you see, this is the plants growing without stress. Here they are with stress. You see, but very much increased here with the exudates of this material. So it can enhance early plant growth. Progress to date, here we are, new PGPR. So these guys, this is not the ones that produce the exudate, but this is the ones that just inoculate onto the plants. So here we are, this is the control. This is the 2 different strains. And this is in the presence of salt stress. Without the salt stress, they had much less effect. But here you can see, yeah, and here's data you can see. But with a bit of stress, what does it say? Plants are pretty much always stressed in the field, at least part of every day. So this is, you can see effects on soybean growth, and intellectual property has been filed on these strains, all 3 of them. So biostimulants, some other stuff. So we're working with our industrial partner on flavonoids. They provided us with some raw flavonoid material. We've done some extracts out of that. And you can see here, this is with and without stress. So we have here controls, and we have with the flavonoid. So actually, this is all with stress in this case. But you can see, this is soybean seed germination. You can see it's much better when the flavonoids are added. So this has a nice positive effect. And this is a field crop trial. So we planted this is the biomass crop. So we planted these in 2019. So I'm just waiting to see what this was the establishment year. I'm waiting to see what the data look like from this year. So hopefully we'll know soon. On the other hand, corn, potato were grown in 2018, 19, 20. In this case, we were adding the consortium we've been working with. So samples being processed now, but this is 5 bacillus strains and various concentrations. Well, actually 1x and 2x, the recommended rate, so the normal rate plus double it, and at two seeding dates. So recommended and late, actually, when they were, in the case of potato, when they were hilling, but in the course of corn, just late. So key findings for corn: biomass production was increased. So and you can see these on clay soil, clay loam soil, sandy soil. So this is a heavy soil, a sort of medium soil, and a light soil. But you can see meaningful increases in every case. And both grain yield and starch content were also significantly increased. So this looks good. And potato field trials, here we are, consortium applied at seeding or at hilling, and nutritional quality was assessed, et cetera. And again, there were increases in starch, et cetera. So there's nice increases in overall production biomass. We see getting close to 30%, and actually tuber yield, so it's the commercial part, at about 20%. So the relevance of all this, we look at it and say, okay, the research demonstrates, or will demonstrate, has demonstrated, I guess, the impact of specific sets of plant growth promoting rhizobacteria, so members of the phytomicrobiome. I always tell my students, if you've been out drinking heavily the night before and you come back into the lab the next morning and you can still say phytomicrobiome or lipocyto-oligosaccharides, any of these things, you're okay. So overall potential of the phytomicrobiome for increasing available biomass to the bioeconomy appears to be quite meaningful. So this is very helpful. This will help remove the greatest bottleneck in the bioeconomy, as we indicated earlier. There's a large potential with regard to further development of current technologies. So we can move ahead with some of the ones we have already, and then we can also isolate new strains. We've gotten quite fast at isolating strains now and screening them. So there's a potential to develop new technologies around this. Relevance to industry. So evaluated consortium shows clear benefits to production of both biomass and food, strongly enhances a market for this consortium, so that's nice, promotes the use of biologicals in general. Research on these novel plant growth hormone strains that we isolated ourselves, the supernate material is being evaluated in a commercial context, and I must say it's showing considerable process. We've been quite happy with that. The company is developing a product based on this. Plant growth hormone rise of bacteria themselves or their products, so this would be signals from them, etc. It can enhance biomass production, and because they are either microbes that were associated with plants anyway, or they're products that are from those microbes. It should be a more sustainable way to increase crop productivity, and as I say here, strengthen the underpinning of the Canadian bioeconomy, and as I've said several times already, help make the crops more resilient to climate change conditions, which are coming. So here we are, critical success factors, and I've got these broken down by type here. Technical, so can new strains be developed for application? It seems like the potential for this is stunningly large. I keep telling my students, I feel like when I walk from my house to my office across the grass, sometimes I'm thinking I'm walking on enormous biological potential here. There's all these microbes that's associated with the roots of these plants. The market itself, essentially all crop production. So anywhere crops are being produced, this stuff could be used. It increases food and biomass production, but particularly in areas where stress is more common because it helps with stress. On the business side, we need growth and development of companies, and we're working with companies to help do that, for both strains and signals. Potential challenges, all three of these, I guess, more or less fall in the technical category. I'm actually not completely sure that the third one is technical, but anyway. So screening for strains and signal compounds. So we've gotten really quite good at this. We can do this pretty quickly. On the technical side here, again, scale up a commercial development. So scale up is a big issue. Eventually one has to do that as you move from the lab bench to the market. And then technical area also develop demand from the bioeconomy. So I'm not sure this is actually technical, it might also be social and economic, including both biomass and food sectors. So there's some technical aspects to it, but okay, critical success factors continued. Here we are. Okay, there's just two more left, so hopefully you can bear with me. Success of the project will, demonstrate the economic and agronomic viability of the phytomicrobiome members. So there are huge numbers of them in there, and it's I always like to say there's an elm tree on my grandfather's farm in Cape Breton Island. It's about 200 years old and probably about 10 tons of above ground biomass, which means it probably has something on the order of 10 tons of below ground biomass. And the rule of thumb is for every gram fresh weight of root tissue, the associated population of microbes is about the same as the population of humans in the world. So a lot of microbes, just with that one tree, with one plant, the population of microbes that are available to sift through is a little overwhelming. And if you look at an entire community, I don't know, it's amazing. And actually, we've been doing quite a lot of focusing recently on undomesticated plants because the microbes associated with domesticated plants are underexplored for sure, but the ones associated with the undomesticated plants are just marginally explored. It's kind of amazing what's not known, but they're very diverse. Okay, we can provide new revenue streams for underutilized marginal land, so we can help the plants grow better there, and we can produce biomass that can be used again for the bioeconomy and to the benefit of agricultural producers. So future work, where we're potentially headed with this, continue to isolate and evaluate new strains for sure, and the compounds they produce. We're doing a bit of that as we move ahead right now. Collect data on strains already under investigation, so we're doing some of that. Collect data on regarding the PGPR biostimulant effects on biomass crops. So, and again, we've got 3 crops in right now, and we'll have some data soon. Evaluate PGPR and PGPR signals with flavonoids. So we mentioned the flavonoid work, so that's another form of biostimulant. And then what happens when we bring these two together? Are there synergies? That would be nice. And then finally, collect data on existing microbial materials, and this is through to the end of the cluster 2023. So this is my summary slide, getting to the end for all of you who are finding this a bit tedious. Here we go. So, okay, summary. An established consortium is showing promise outside the greenhouse. So this is the consortium we've been working with was initially tested under greenhouse conditions with greenhouse crops and seemed to work. They had no idea whether they were working in the much more demanding and complex environment in the field, but it seems to. New strains are isolated, are showing promise. So these are the new strains we've taken off Amphicarpi brachyta, and they actually, it's with a relatively small effort of isolation, et cetera, screening, bioprospecting, we've got some very nice strains right away. Evaluation of other biostimulants is ongoing and showing promise. So this is say particularly with the one that's the strain that's producing the supername is active because it seems likely that it's producing some kind of signal into that supername, and that's why it works. So they say this approach has the potential to enhance production of biomass from both dedicated biomass crops and food crops. So this, let's say, food and fuel here, and utilization of underexploited, more marginal lands here. So facilitating establishment and growth of the Canadian bioeconomy and the ag sector. So that's the end. I don't know if, again, if anybody has questions, I'm happy to do the best I can.
Okay, thank you very much, Don. Yeah, we have a few questions and we have about 8 minutes, so I guess we can address those questions. So Don, basically the focus of your activity in biomass cluster is on the production side, right? You look at, you talk about production, supply chain, logistics, and market. So you're trying to see if you have a potential to produce new strain for food application and also emerging biomass crops, right? That's the focus of your activity.
Yeah, although I would say it can work on food crops, which can assist in food production. But at the same time, it's also, there's biomass produced by the food crops that's available, at least I say about a third of it a year is available for use as biomass for the bioeconomy as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, okay.
Yep, sounds good, thanks. And we have a question from Lope. He's asking, can you give example of microbial species involved in the microbial consortium?
Well, the one we're testing, all of the members of it are bacillus. And I think, I don't know if they ever gave us the species names. They gave us the strain numbers. But in any case, but they're all in the genus Bacillus. So I'm not sure we have the species designations on those. So we just refer to them by their strain number all the time. But and maybe the company kept those from us on purpose. So I'm not sure. Anyway, but yeah, but there are. I mean, we do work with a few other ones. Bacillus, actually, if you're isolating microbes from the roots of plants, the two generally you're almost always going to get are Pseudomonas and Bacillus. They seem to be very, very prevalent. So.
Okay, great. And I have one question for you, Don. So you're talking about new strains, again for food or for a biomass application. Can you talk about a little about adoption rates? You know, so one of the challenge we have in agriculture is that sometimes it takes years to adopt a new crop or a new agriculture practice. How long usually takes in Canada to adopt a new crops or a strain and make it a commercial crop, basically?
Yeah. Well, if you want to get one of these strains out on the market, et cetera, or something produced by the strain, I would say that through most of my career, we were working on this, and we got some things on the market. It took a bit of effort. It was a bit slow all the time. Having said that, I guess about 10 years ago, the human microbiome became a sudden area of interest. And about 6 or 7 years ago, suddenly there was interest in the plant microbiome. Right now, there's a lot of industrial interest in these things. And so they could come to market relatively quickly, I think, right now. 10 years ago, maybe not so much, but I think now it's possible to get them out pretty quickly. There's a lot of willingness to support these things. I think the industrial sector has realized the potential of these things, and so they're interested. Yeah.
Okay. And do you think a huge capital investment is going to be involved if you want to make it a commercial crop?
Well, you say you want to make a commercial crop, or you want to make these strains applicable to commercial crops?
Yeah. The second one, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, nothing is free, but if you compare it to some other things, right? So this what you have to do the work to isolate and characterize the strains, show that they have the correct effects and things like this. But we've gotten pretty good at doing that, pretty good at isolating them, pretty good at screening them and characterizing them. So it can be relatively fast. And I think it's not wildly expensive compared to a lot of other things that you could be trying to do by way of commercializing things. If you're trying to do a GMO crop or something like that these days, it's regulatory burden is huge. So it's not as bad as all of that. So I think it's not free, that's for sure, but it's not as cripplingly expensive as some things.
Okay, thanks. And we have a question that, have you tried these strains under cold stress?
Yeah, we've done a little bit with cold stress, and actually these ones, no, we haven't tried cold stress. Some of the other ones we have in the lab, we've tried with cold stress, and they do show positive effects on cold stress, but we just haven't gotten to that with these ones yet. So.
Okay, thanks. I guess we have 3 minutes. If you don't mind, I can ask one of the questions for previous presentation, if it's that
Sure.
okay with you. Yeah. So,
I'm happy to chat, God knows.
So do you see a role for the cluster to influence policies, especially on agriculture? Government is spending substantial funding on forestry.
Yeah, well, we chat back and forth with our AAFC representatives, et cetera, and we try to make sure we make clear to them what our findings are and things like this. So hopefully some of this can be used to inform policy development. I mean, if you're going to develop effective policy, it's good to have all the information you can. So we try to make sure that that's available. And in that sense, I'd say yes, it potentially has a role.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And I guess quite a relevant similar question, is BioMass Canada is planning on increasing public investment? If so, how?
Well, we public investment. So this is investment from government agencies, et cetera, I guess. So yeah, so we do quite a lot of work with industry. So, private investment, et cetera, et cetera. Public investment, I mean, the investment of AAFC in this cluster, I guess, would be public investment. So it's a good start. So I think in that sense, yes. And we one of the activities with us right now got funding at one point from a slightly different source, and then was sort of folded into us. And so I guess in that sense, yes, we have. But hopefully, if government wants to do it, hopefully we could be a platform that they could use to start expanding from, because we have some of the expertise and we have some of the understandings that they might need. So.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I guess we have the last question, and that's what's the market difference or viability between bio-oil, biochar, and gases?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah, tough question.
Well, it's a huge question. It's a huge question. I mean,
yeah.
And it depends on a whole lot of things. Like biochar is interesting in a lot of ways. I find it very interesting. I've done some research on it myself as a soil additive and things like this. It does a lot of nice things. If you're just making biochar, it's way too expensive. But if it's a byproduct of, say, biofuel production, then that might work. When you get into the fuel side, then you have and again, it depends. If you're talking about biochar, then I assume you're talking about pyrolysis. And if that's the case, then you're looking at bio-oils versus the syngas, or something that's been cleaned up from syngas. Bio-oils are interesting, but they're kind of, right now at least, they tend to be messy oils. There's a lot of oxygen in there, et cetera. But they're coming along. They recently got they got allowance to use them for home heating fuel and things like that. The energy density is a bit lower and things like this, and they can be a bit unstable, but they're definitely of interest, and they're starting to be used in some cases. And the gas, if you clean it up, there's still lots of things you can do with that that's interesting too. Certainly, I was at a facility actually a set of facilities in Germany where they were doing a really interesting thing. They were they were doing most of it. They're pushing the biomass pyrolysis as much as possible into gas. They were running the gas into a very forgiving diesel engine and running that to make electricity. And so then you get one of those things about, you say, well, usually about the best you can hope for in terms of energy conversion, et cetera, in a system, you're going to look at least 50% losses of energy. You just get waste heat. But what they were doing on top of this, so they were doing electricity, they were capturing the heat and piping it out to the surrounding communities to heat homes. So their actual overall energy efficiency was over 80%. I found that a bit breathtaking. I thought that was really, really impressive. So there's some interesting things we could be doing all around with this. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Don. And I guess we are at the end of the session. I really appreciate the that the attendees, they join the meetings and also for the good question. And I hope they also continue contributing to the future session. The next session is going to be on December 17. That's that's Thursday, again from 11 to 12 Eastern time. And we have one of a colleague from University of Saskatchewan talking about the biochar production from Canadian BioMass. So hopefully we see all of you in the next session. And again, thanks a lot, Don, for great presentation. Especially, I'm sure your presentation gave a really good overview of the BioMass Canada and the opportunity to working together to use all of the underutilized biomass in Canada to support the development of bioeconomy in Canada. Do you have any closing statement, Don, before we finish?
I'd just like to thank you for organizing all this and looking after the details of the organization. These are always tedious jobs, and that you've done a good job, and I'm very grateful. And Xiaomin for organizing all of this, for organizing it in the larger picture. I'd like to thank everybody for their questions and their attention. So that's where I am. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and hope everyone has a safe weekend, and hopefully see you in the next webinar. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.